Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. It's episode 125. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Mike Koomar with me, and tonight we're going to go over some of the winners and losers from the weekend, and then we're going to take a little bit of a long-term look into some hot seat candidates that may or may not have a different job next year. So, Mike, we're going to start off with winners and losers. We'll start with you. Who was one winner from the weekend?
I think clear winner from the weekend's got to be Michigan. They had that big win at home, a game that they trailed for pretty much the entirety, about 36 minutes of the game against Nebraska. Found a way to scrap away a victory there. Look, at the end of the day, they should have dominated Nebraska a lot earlier in the post because that was their strength and Nebraska's weakness. But they were able to chip away and find a way to get a dub. And a huge victory there. And they get to follow that up by going on the road to East Lansing. Looks like there was some bad blood after the fact between Izzo and Dusty May. But after getting a huge lead, they let it slip against Michigan State. But then Michigan was able to come back, be resilient, and get a bunch of stops on defense coming down the stretch to end up winning by 12, getting two top 10 wins over the week. It's really impressive stuff. And I think Michigan's the clear winner of the week.
Yeah, the Dusty Izzo stuff went under the radar for me and Joe yesterday. We talked about this game
Yeah.
a lot, but not that. Looking back at some of the plays, Mike, I think it's pretty clear that there were some plays that Jeremy Fears probably shouldn't have made there. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, this is not the only game where that's happened. So,
No.
Dusty obviously puts the shot out there. He tried to hurt Yaxel, and then Izzo fires back with, the you did that too, and if you want to talk about it, you know my number. Bizarre. They're playing again, which is something to look out for on the last day of the
They did.
season.
Yeah.
But that's something odd that I didn't really think about it. I'm sure the clips are going around social media, and with every game, especially this one with so many eyes on it as a standalone game. But yeah, I think Michigan really, we learned a lot about them. They obviously did so well to get the lead. They gave it up. It looked like Michigan State was just going to run right through them. And, you know, they took control of the game back and said, no, we're the better
Yeah.
basketball team. Um, they're definitely a winner. And Mike, for my winner, I'm going to stay in the Big Ten. I'm going to go with Illinois, the team that
Yeah.
currently occupies the top spot with Michigan. Both the teams are 10-1. They go on the road and beat Nebraska. They avenge a loss from earlier in the season. Nebraska went to Champaign and picked up the dub. Um, but Illinois, Keaton Wagler especially, took control of that game in the second half on the road. Same theme as last time, and they get a big win. Mike, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. I think it's been really surprising to see how well Illinois has done in the absence of Kylan Boswell. You looked at this game, Illinois, we talked about it a little bit with the Michigan Nebraska game, but Illinois found the ability to get the ball inside more frequently coming down the stretch in this one. And that's what was the key to success for Illinois. Uh, Look, their guard play is phenomenal. We know that. They were able to get some more shots off, get some more threes coming down the stretch. But to be able to do this without their best player on the team, I know it's not looking like that right now, but Boswell's still the leader of this Illinois team. They're going to be really dangerous, and this is a team that's going to compete for a Final Four, no question.
Yeah, it really makes you think. Brad Underwood's got to be thinking about a few things when Kylan Boswell comes back. Like Wagler should be the ball handler. It's not like I'm not saying Boswell shouldn't play, but he should probably play off the ball. His defense is too good. He'll be out there. But Wagler can take over a game, and it doesn't even look like he is even breaking a sweat. Like he will just go right past the
Take
best
over a game
defender.
well. I think Boswell's a better defender and a better ball handler. He's not as good of a shooter, but if
Yeah,
you can get Wagler some more pop-up shots, spot-up shots, maybe that's the key to success for the Fighting Illini. But they're going to have to still have Boswell playing 35
yeah.
minutes a game, I
They're
think, as the point guard.
they're incredibly, and it's sort of both teams were here, but Illinois, with since Boswell's out, they play seven players, and
Yeah.
it's 8 with Boswell, so they're not entirely deep to begin with. And Nebraska plays 7 with Frager and Mast back in there. Now they gave some freshmen some minutes with those two out against Michigan. They did all right, but yeah, the size really became an issue for Nebraska. They obviously shoot a lot of threes. They have some great shooters. That it's just a variance business, 3-point line. And
Yeah.
they were able to beat Michigan State with only 5 2-point field goals earlier this year, and I think they only had 9 in this one. And ultimately, they were unable to get a defensive rebound and have enough on offense. But yeah, I was really impressed with Illinois here. These were both the games that I did live commentary for, Mike, and based on the viewership of those, that we'll be doing those again. That's for sure. At the very minimum, Friday, I'm looking at for the game that we're going to preview in a little bit, but maybe even before then. But yeah, these were two games
Yeah.
that were a lot of fun to watch as a neutral, and it's Michigan and Illinois at the top of the league now, with Michigan State and Nebraska just behind them. All right, Mike, let's go back to you for your second winner.
Well, you took mine, but I'm gonna go with Vanderbilt in this one. Look, Vanderbilt, they had the rough go at it, but they've now had three straight wins. They had a big win during the week, and then they find a way to squeak out a victory against Ole Miss. Game they were dominating. I think you go in between them and between Kansas. Kansas is a team. Talk about a big turnaround. You looked at Peterson. He sat out for most of the second half, and they clearly let Brigham Young back in that game to the point where Brigham Young almost won. But that's why I'm going to go with Vanderbilt because they just seem like a little more of a complete team without their star player. The Doors are looking like they're back to being potentially the best team in the SEC. I think it's still probably Florida, who had another big win on Sunday, but the Doors are looking good.
Yeah, and they get away with what was not a great performance from them. They picked the right time for that performance against Ole
Yeah.
Miss, and they get the job done, and it's no harm, no foul. I'm going to go to the SEC for my two winners here, Mike. The John Calipari revenge game. Kentucky
Yeah.
goes on the road to Bud Walton, punches Arkansas in the face, both figuratively and literally, and get the victory on the road. Like, just when you think, they had been on the up and they got absolutely smoked by Vanderbilt, and then they're right back here with another big win. They're going to make the tournament. They're not a very good team, but they're incredibly inconsistent. But that means you got to be good some of the time. So that game, Mike, I didn't catch most of it because I was
Man,
in the midst of getting my heart ripped out and then put back in by UCLA. But every time you want to count out these Wildcats, they find a way to just say, "Hey, like remember us." And then on the Arkansas side of things, this isn't the losers' side yet, but they just can't seem to put together more than a few good performances. So, what are your thoughts on Kentucky?
man, talk about a character building win this was. Um, Kentucky had three technical fouls in about 38 seconds. And one of them,
Yeah,
um, pretty warranted. But then you looked at another trash talking one that was completely bogus. And then Mark Pope didn't really say anything that bad. He gets teed up as well. So you looked at two of those three technical fouls in 30, I think it was 36 or 38 seconds. One of the two completely switched the narrative of this game. Kentucky was in control. Those three technical fouls and a couple of buckets later, they're down by a couple of possessions. Kentucky's able to fight their way back from that and secure the victory on the road, a really raucous Bud Walton Arena. That's just such a big statement win for them, especially after they get crushed in Nashville earlier on in the week. Um, that's what made Vanderbilt my second team of the week. Right there was that win, but just a huge character building win for this team. And I think you wonder if that is going to spark a little bit of an uptick. I would argue this is probably the biggest win of the Mark Pope era as well. I mean, look, Kentucky was solid last year. They didn't have very many big time wins. This one was a huge win on the road that really bumped up their abilities to make the tournament. What a big win.
yeah, 15-7 with a quad 1A win looks a whole lot better than 14-8 without one. My
Yeah.
last winner, Mike, is going to be a team that you sort of did mention on Sunday. It's Florida. They host Nate Oates, Charles Bediako in Alabama, and they absolutely crush them. 100-77. Florida had 72 points in the paint, which is something that they have probably done before, to be honest with you, but not against a team that's supposed to have a 7-foot professional shot blocker in there. So Florida takes care of business. There were a few words exchanged from the coaches in that one too, both before the game and after. In the midst of sort of complimenting the Florida Bigs, Nate Oates said, you know, no wonder they get so many rebounds when they can stand in the lane for 8 to 10 seconds. And then after this one, Todd Golden went out of his way to compliment his players and how they were able to get so many rebounds while only standing in the lane for 1 or 2 seconds. So another coach's battle here that probably means nothing, but this stuff is around in the media. They hear it too, for better or worse. But Florida takes care of business, and it seems like Florida and Alabama are two teams heading in pretty opposite directions right now.
Yeah, I'm going to get to Alabama in my
Yeah,
losers,
so
but
let's
you look
Florida
at
here. Yeah,
yeah, talking about Florida. I mean, Todd Golden really spoke this one into existence in his coach's show. He was asked about Bediako playing, and he said, "Look, it doesn't matter if he's playing or not. We're going to beat him."
yeah.
And his
I think he
team
said
that
it.
really seemed to
He
inspire
said we're
his
going to
team.
crush them, not just
So,
beat them.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And how about the Florida student section calling out G League dropout to Bediako? That was outstanding by the Gainesville crew there. But look, Florida, they had one slip up last week. It may have been 2 weeks ago at this point. Aside from that slip up against Auburn, they've been above head and shoulders the best team in the SEC. Vanderbilt might compete with them, and there's a couple of other good teams out there. Look, you never know what Auburn or Arkansas or A&M are going to do coming down the stretch, but it clearly shows right now that Florida, they were battle tested early on in the season. They didn't get any of those big wins they needed to in the out of conference, but they're making up for it and then some during conference play, being able to not only shoot the ball well, but also dominating the boards against Alabama was surprising.
And it's a little bit of a conversation on style of play, Mike, and I think we'll do it here because the I don't know if Alabama is solely responsible for it, but they are very much pioneers of the let's shoot a lot of threes and play super high tempo and don't play defense.
Yeah.
And those teams have been successful in the past over the course of the entire season. Now, not as successful in the tournament. We've seen teams that struggle on defense have a bad shooting day and they lose. Is there any sort of reversion here with some of the teams at the top of this sport this year, Mike? Like the number one team in the country, for example, does not make a lot of threes in Arizona. Florida just shooting 13 of them here out of their 78 shots.
Yeah.
You have teams like Illinois who they certainly do shoot it more than those two teams, but they primarily rely on the paint. You have teams like Iowa State who are sort of in between. Duke, is there a little bit of a reversion away from the let's jack a bunch of threes philosophy?
Absolutely. And you even look at it like Michigan State. I
Yeah,
know
them
Michigan
too.
State dropped a few spots in the rankings. They're a team that's never been a three-point shooting team. They're a team that's always built on defense. And I think you're even seeing that shift in some other schools that predominantly in the past have relied on the three ball. Like I'll say, for example, we don't get to talk about my Baylor Bears this year because they look like the bad news Bears. But that's another team that they've kind of shifted away from being a predominantly three-point team. So it's interesting to see kind of the cycle of college basketball, not only in terms of the talent, we're back to the one and done train that we saw Calipari really perfect at Kentucky in the early 2010s, but now we're going back to hey, it's not all about just shooting the three ball. Arizona State is quintessential, or Arizona is quintessential at that, just getting the ball down low, letting your bigs work, and then playing outstanding defense. You look at the top 10 teams in the country. I think the only one that's really an outstanding three-point shooting team is Nebraska.
And
Illinois
it's
is a very good three-point shooting team as well. Um, but teams aren't getting going to win March by just making a bunch of threes this year.
And
It never happens. It definitely won't this year.
it's a little bit beyond just the percentages too, because Arizona actually has a pretty good percentage, but the volume is just not there. They take 15 to
Yeah.
18 of them a game and make six of them, and they still get to 80 plus points. Um,
Yeah.
so
And in years past, we've said that you have to take like 30 to 32 3-point attempts to be competitive. And that's not the
and
case.
and there is a little bit of a formula to this, right? You have to play good defense if you're not shooting a lot of threes. But these teams
Yeah.
are like UConn. Also is another example. Now they did make 16 of them against Creighton, but that was
Was an
not the norm.
anomaly.
That they're
Yeah.
usually in the 20s for attempts. 8 for 22, and they primarily rely on defense. Especially, UConn is doing the Big East a big favor by not blowing them out for their analytics, like until this Creighton game. But they
That was
have,
ugly.
yeah, I mean, 85 to 58. Creighton not going to be a loser for me, and I don't think they will for you, but potentially an off-season episode about the end of an era there. But yeah, it seems like the 3-point line, Mike, is it's a lot of variance, and it's hard to win a championship with a lot of variance. It's not hard to win a game with variance. You see it a lot. Some team could go 18 for 32 from three one day.
Yeah.
They're going to go 6 for 32 the next game, but it is possible. So I think we're seeing a
Yeah.
little bit of a reversion to playing defense and being able to finish around the rim.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, well, let's turn it over to the negative side, the losers, Mike. You went first for winners, so I will go first for losers. Going to be a little bit of an outside the box one here. It's a team that I think we both have a lot of respect for. It's Texas Tech. They go on the road to the space city of Orlando and UCF, and they lose on the road to UCF. Now, the Knights aren't a bad team at all, and they're probably a tournament team. Losing on the road there is not really anything to be ashamed about, but the manner of it was pretty bad. I think this was a noon Eastern tip. Their defense was shockingly bad in this one. UCF,
Yeah.
this was not a very high possession game, and they get to 88. They had a 10 possession stretch in the second half where they scored 22 points. It seems like Texas Tech, you want to put them in that conversation of the Houstons and the Arizonas, but then they do this. So,
Yeah.
where are you at with
It, it,
Texas Tech?
I think this was kind of a weird one.
Yeah.
When you're in the rhythm of a season, they had a whole week off. They didn't play during the week, so they had Saturday to Saturday off. It is kind of weird. Probably got them a little bit out of rhythm. And this was pretty far travel for Texas Tech, going to Orlando to take on the UCF Knights. So I think that's another wrinkle to this. Look, at the end of the day, there still really isn't much of an excuse. Um, Texas Tech looked terrible defensively, gave up a lot of easy open looks in this one. It wasn't just like UCF was chucking up threes and they made them. I think UCF only made 6 threes in this game. So they're just dominating what's known to be a pretty physical Texas Tech team, right? Like Texas Tech is built on being able to overpower you with JT Toppin and Christian Anderson and company. They just weren't able to do that. And so I think that's what was the most concerning. But at the same point, look, I would say UCF is a very solid basketball team. And I think they're getting, they got a lot of flack because they just didn't play the strongest out of conference schedule. But when you peel back the onion, look, they beat Texas A&M. A&M's leading the SEC right now.
Yeah.
Um, they lost an early one to Vanderbilt. You look at three of their four losses are to teams inside the top 15 right now. One of them's the number one team in the country in Arizona, a team that they've played closer than anybody else, arguably, in the conference season. So they played well against them. They got blown out against Iowa State, but this is a good team. Coach Dawkins definitely came into the season arguably on the hottest of seats in the Big 12, other than maybe Coach Hurley at Arizona State. But he's really proven his worth here. And this one, coupled with their win against Kansas earlier in the year, look, UCF is a tough place to play, and that's what we're figuring out this year.
Yeah, the analytics are suggesting that they aren't as good of a team as they probably are because they didn't do, like a super great job of blowing out their competition in the non-conference And you look at like
Yeah.
a home win by 22 against Florida Gulf Coast, like okay,
Yeah.
neutral win against like these margins.
Beating VMI by 25 doesn't do anything for you when VMI is one of the worst rated teams in every
Yeah.
single metric.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like they didn't cover that game. So and then add this into a couple of rather heavy losses. Like that's why they're 46th in Torvik. Like they're probably more like in the 30s. They have only losses in the top quad. The only thing is they only do have one win in quad two. So they're a team. I mean, we can get into bracketology a little bit later, but they're a team like that might go up by just winning quad two games. They've already proven they can win quad one. They're 4-4, two of them in the
Yeah.
top part of quad one. If 5-0 in quad two is a whole lot better than 1-0. And they have West Virginia, TCU at home, and then they go to Utah, and then they have Baylor and Oklahoma State at home. Like those are all quad two games where they should probably win, at least three or four of those. So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
might
I mean, you
appear to
look
be
at
a bubble team right now, but they have the chance to really get up there.
you look at really their next four games at Cincinnati, home against West Virginia, TCU, and then at Utah. I mean, looking at that schedule, the toughest one is going to be at Cincinnati. If they can get that win, man, I think you're looking at four in a row. And at that point, you're not even looking at are
Yeah.
they going to be in the big dance? You're looking at can they get to that next level and get to a protected seed? Now that's a long ways off.
Yeah.
They got to win four straight games to get there. But with that being said, I don't think UCF's going to have any trouble getting a seven or maybe even a six seed come March.
And they actually do play Houston away before those four games, Mike. So that's
They
obviously a
do.
house
That's right.
money.
Yeah.
That's a house money game where you're going to be underdogs by 15 plus points, and there's really nothing to lose there. If you get blown out, you get
Yeah.
blown out. If you keep it close and lose, there's still something to take away. But yeah, like let's say they win the Cincinnati game away, which is quad one, and then the next three, which are quad two. All of a sudden, they're 5-4 in Q1 and 4-0 in Q2, 9-4 in the top two quads. You're awfully close. You're way closer to a 4 seed than a 10 seed. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Probably in like the 6 or 7 or 8 range. Let's see right now where I have them. I did this yesterday morning, so I do have them as my second 8 seed right now. Um, but yeah, that's just really the analytics holding them back, which does matter more for like the placement rather than actually getting in or not. Um, so like they might be a little bit lower than some of the teams that they have way better resumes than, but that's just how it works. But all right, Mike. Well, Texas Tech was a loser for me. Let's get to your first loser.
Yeah, my first loser, I think, is a pretty obvious one. It's going to be the Alabama Crimson Tide. Ever since the controversial return of Charles Bediako, this team is 1-2. They do have one dominant win against a really bad Missouri team, but in the two games that are against competitive teams, they lost against Tennessee at home, and then they get absolutely run off the floor by a Florida team. Look, Florida's good. They're not supposed to beat you by 23 points, especially when you've got a washed up NBA guy on your team. Look, at the end of the day, Alabama, we've known this for a while, but if they can't score 80 points, they're not going to win a basketball game. And even sometimes when they score
Yeah.
80 points, they have a hard time winning. They can't win a defensive battle. And even in this one against Florida, it didn't matter if they scored 90 points. They could not stop the Florida Bigs in this one. Florida completely dominated possession in this game. And it was ugly from the get go for the Crimson Tide. You're looking forward to March. This is not a team that can compete for a championship. Not right now, at least. Something crazy is going to happen for them to be able to do that. They're either going to have to get, white hot in March, or they're going to have to learn how to play defense, and the latter is not going to happen.
Like they could make a Sweet 16 just from the fact that 2 games in 3 days. Let's say they're a six
Yeah,
seed, like they could beat a 3 seed. Like
sure. Or a three seed loses to a 14, and
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it could happen.
and like if they get like let's say this scenario, they get like a team from the first four in the 6-11 game, like they're winning that by a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just they have not been able to consistently put things together. Mike, I've got the Torvik page up, and defensively, like the overall like just raw numbers of defensive like shooting percentages are actually pretty good, but you talk about a team that's top 50 or just outside the top 50 in 3-point percentage defense and 2-point percentage defense. You're like, all right, this should be an all right team. But because you play so many possessions, you're outside of the top 60 in defense. And that is not a good strategy. That's a strategy for getting upset early in the tournament. Now, I think Alabama might be able to get away with that just because they have so much firepower. But, you look at, there's a lot of red over here on the defensive page. They have not. They've only lost one game where they've kept the opponent under 80, and that was the Tennessee game. That was the 67 possessions. So that was their slowest one of the year. So I think there is a lot to worry about here if you're Alabama wanting a protected seed. Like they're 14-7. Like if you have double-digit losses, it's really hard to get a high seed just from the fact that you've lost so many games. Now, I do think it does get a little bit easier for them coming up. Texas A&M at home, Auburn on the road, not easy, but at Ole Miss, home to South Carolina, home to Arkansas, at LSU, home to Mississippi State.
It's easier.
Theoretically, they could win all those games. Now, they've shown that they won't because they're bound to have a stinker against somebody and lose. But, yeah, it is just like a bad version of the Nate Oates style. Like it's not a whole lot different other than they're just not as good.
Yeah.
But
They're just not. And they don't shoot the ball as well either.
yeah, and in terms of offense, like they're not inside the top 100 in 3-point percentage. Now,
Yeah.
volume wise, they probably make a ton, but if you're outside of the top 100 and something like that, can't be your calling card, and
Yeah.
it appears to be for Alabama. All right, Mike, I'm going to go with a loser from the Big Ten, team that we have not talked about a lot this year because they haven't deserved it. It's going to be Maryland. Buzz Williams' first year down there in College Park. He left Texas A&M late in the cycle. Texas A&M hires Bucky McMillan. They're in the lead in the SEC off a short offseason. The whole gimmick there isn't a gimmick. That works. They're going to make the tournament. And on the other hand, Maryland, who Buzz Williams thinks is at least a little bit of a better job than Texas A&M, they have been the worst team in the Big Ten by a lot this year now that Penn State has won a game. So, Mike, we don't have to spend too much time on Maryland here, but a disaster first year for the Buzz.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at their last three games, they've played three pretty good teams. But you'd like to think that they could at least play one of them close. And their closest loss in the last three games was 19 points to Illinois. Purdue is looking for some revenge. Uh, you shouldn't lose a home game ever by 30 points. But Purdue is especially not one of those teams either. When you're Power Five, you have the ability that Maryland does to recruit talent, especially local talent, that was proven last year, even with Kevin Willard. So, not a good start. You understand Buzz Williams's reasoning for leaving, right? He doesn't like to stay at a program for more than 5 years. So he did his 5 years at A&M and was gone, just like he was at Virginia Tech before then. But yeah, this is incredibly concerning. You look at really their inability to compete in games aside from Penn State. They don't have close losses either. I mean, I think their closest loss in the Big Ten is a 10-point loss to a pretty bad Oregon team at home. So it's pretty embarrassing. This is rough stuff for the Terps, and it's not going to get any better this year. I think at this point, their fan base is just hoping the season ends as quickly as possible.
Yeah, this is not what they were promised with the Buzz Williams experience. Like at times it wasn't going to
No,
be pretty, but they were going to get after it. They're going to play defense and they're going to win a couple games that they shouldn't. And if you get a couple of gifted offensive players, that's when the formula works. But
it hasn't
didn't.
even been close.
I mean, Pharrell Payne, their leader, got hurt early on and has not played for a
Yeah,
while. But still, like they have enough talent to be better than this. Like Miles Rice was a
yeah,
solid player to Indiana last year. They have Darius Adams, who's a 5-star recruit. You have a Solomon Washington. You have a couple of guys from Texas A&M that know him come over. And look, I didn't think they were going to win a ton of games this year, but didn't think they'd be this easy of an out. On the other hand, but Mike, let's go to you for your second loser.
I think the obvious second loser is Nebraska. We've talked a lot about them. They've had their chances this week, golden opportunities. Really let a game slip through their fingertips against Michigan. I think they were kind of exposed for not really being that strong on the boards in both the Michigan and the Illinois games. But we've talked about that at length a little bit. So I'm going to want to focus on another school, specifically a player on that team. That's going to be BYU and AJ DeBonsa. Look, BYU had two golden opportunities to make their presence felt and maybe compete for a Big 12 title this week. They only lost by a few points at home against Arizona, but if you watch that whole game, Arizona dominated that game until they almost coughed it up in the last minute when BYU went on like a 10-0 run in the last 40 seconds. But with that being said, they have another golden opportunity on the road at Kansas. Similar, they're getting bodied that entire game, and DeBonsa was completely MIA in this one. The only reason that this game stayed moderately competitive was because of a Herculean effort by Richie Saunders.
Hey,
He had
talk, talk
33 points, 10
talk
rebounds.
about a low key winner of the weekend, Mike, with that many NBA scouts in the arena. Richie
Richie
Saunders
Saunders for sure.
may have made
Yeah.
himself a lot of money.
Made him shot 11 or shot 19 field goals, made 11 of them, six threes in this one. He was inflappable. It seemed like the only hope that BYU had. And on the other side, AJ DeBonsa was not even close to being the leader of his team. It was all Richie Saunders and Rob Wright, who made some costly turnovers coming down the stretch. But I think it just proved, look, BYU, they had some Final Four aspirations going into this season. And unless something weird happens come March, I don't think this is that team. They've lost three of their last four against the really, other than that, those are the only tough teams they've had to play in conference this year. They've had to play K-State, Utah twice. One of them was close, which is kind of scary. Arizona State and TCU. None of those are big time opponents. So 0-3 against Big 12 tournament teams so far this year. Look, it's only going to get tougher for them either in conference. They got Houston coming up. Baylor on the road, I think, is going to be a sneaky tough one. Baylor's going to sell out that crowd and be giving Rob Wright a run for his money. They got to go to Arizona, and then they get to host Texas Tech to finish out the year. So they have a tough schedule coming down the stretch. I'll be honest, they're not a guarantee for a protected seed. Certainly not right now.
Yeah, they probably could be a little better. I have them as the last four seed right now, but with a couple of SEC teams like Florida right on their tail, I think like just from a prediction point of view, you would think that Florida could probably overtake them.
Yeah.
Like just because they're playing better and than BYU, and Florida has a great
And Florida
resume
looks like a better
anyway.
team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing with BYU is like when the Debanza thing didn't work and he was taking a lot of tough shots and he wasn't making them, they didn't really have like another way other than Richie Saunders, and and then defensively like they weren't very good either. So yeah, three losses in the last four, with the one win being the statistically easiest game possible in the Big 12, the bottom team at home. Like they've got
Yeah.
a road game to Oklahoma State up next. They need a win to get back
That's
into
not easy.
tournament consideration. And then Houston, like you said, like this, like they're gonna have to figure it out. They're gonna have to start playing better, or they're gonna keep losing games. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so that's winners and losers. Let's wrap this up, Mike, with a little bit of a hot seat conversation. Some are a little bit more well known than others. I'm going to start with a pretty obvious one, and it's going to be your former assistant coach, Jerome Tang at Kansas State. The first year it was really fun with Noel and Keontae Johnson, but it has been a significant decline in the 3 years since. And, they get Coleman Hawkins last year. They get PJ Haggerty this year, one of the highest sought after transfers in the portal, and they are continuously, whilst wearing horrendous uniforms, just getting crushed in the Big 12. Like, it should be better than this.
Yeah. I think that the tricky part of Jerome Tang right now is going to be the buyout. talking about if he gets bought out of his contract, it would be the biggest buyout in college basketball history. He's making about 3.6 million a year right now. That goes up about 100,000 every year. Oh, and he's on contract through 2030. So that's one thing that could stop Kansas State from firing him and giving him one more shot. And it's a guy that you really wanted to see work. Just a really great
Yeah.
guy, great character. I've met him a couple of times, just an outstanding leader. And you know that he really bought in to that culture at Kansas State and tried to build one of his own. But part of it too is it's just tough in the Big 12. When you're not the best team in the country, if Kansas State was in the ACC, yeah, they'd be probably above 500, and maybe they'd be on the bubble for the big dance. But in the Big 12, it's just so tough, and they've had a really tough go at things this year. But at the end of the day, it's just not living up to the expectations when you're getting in the guys that are supposed to be making you the big bucks, that you're paying the big bucks in NIL, and they're not performing. I think that's the big issue is right now Kansas State's investing a lot in their basketball program, and they're not getting a good output.
Yeah, I think like I wouldn't say that they're near like the best in terms of like the resources. In fact, they're probably below average, but like you said, they have gotten highly sought after transfers these past couple years.
Yeah,
And like it's not fair like BYU and Texas Tech and if any more come to mind, like they're the top in terms of resources.
not
But
even close. Yeah,
and then after that, I think Kansas is probably up there in terms of basketball, and then Houston's probably in a good spot. But I feel like it was like the middle of the pack is there for the taking in the Big 12. They haven't really taken it. It's been a steady decline here. The past 2 years haven't been terrible, but they haven't been great either. And then this year it seems to have fallen off completely. And it may have been like the first year wasn't all his players. Like Noel was there with Bruce Weber, and Keontae Johnson was a guy who was a great transfer that nobody else could get because of his health situation. And Jerome Tang had experience with similar type situations at Baylor. Like Keontae Johnson, like he turned out to be an unbelievable player, and what a great transfer he was. But I think that there were a lot of teams that didn't even want to take the risk with him.
didn't want to take the
So
risk with the heart condition.
so
Yeah.
it paid off big time for him. But now that you look at that, and maybe he may have locked into that. So Jerome Tang is my
Yeah,
first one on the hot seat.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, look, Kansas State's a program. They expect to be in the NCAA tournament every single year. They don't expect to have a deep run every single year like they did that one year, but they at least expect to be competitive and be playing in March. And as this season currently looks out, over the last 3 seasons, they'll have a losing record. That's really not acceptable in Manhattan. I hope Tang turns it around. If he doesn't, I hope he ends up back in Waco. But
Yeah, he,
the
he
one
will be
thing Kansas State's
hired
going to have to
so
get is that
so
buyout.
quickly as an associate head coach.
He'd be back
Yeah,
in Waco like that. At least I hope so.
yeah.
You know, I hope nobody else nabs him before we do. I don't think they will though.
What about somebody that you're going to throw in the hot seat here?
Hate to do it, but I'm going to throw Kim English on there,
He was my
Providence.
second one. Yep.
Kim English is a guy. Look, he seems like a pretty likable coach. And look, Providence is competitive with him. The issue is they're not winning games with Kim English. They're coming close. They're knocking on the door consistently. But in 3 seasons, they won't go to the NCAA tournament. And some of these performances at the end of the game, it's just like, how did you lose this one? I'll say UConn, for example, when they hosted UConn a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago at this point. I mean, that was a game I
They had
literally,
it.
my jaw hit the floor. I was so stunned that they lost that game. But it continued. That loss against Villanova, at Marquette, Georgetown. I mean, talk about a collapse. I think that was kind of when we realized this was the beginning of the end, was that game against Georgetown where they fumbled a 23-point lead. They're really competitive in most of their basketball games. I mean, their loss to Villanova, I think, is just one of two double-digit losses this season in Big East play. They've lost, I think, three overtime games. They're just consistently right there, but they can't close it. Seton Hall, another game, they completely choked that one away early on in the year. I remember that one.
Yeah,
So Kim English,
you watch them for
likable
30
guy.
minutes, Mike, and they should be way better than they are.
Yeah, I mean, you watch them for yeah, 30 minutes, you'd think they're an NCAA tournament team. And you look at their capabilities. Look, they pick off, five of these should have won games out of the eight. I mean, we're talking about a bubble team, at
And
least an
they're
NIT team.
even right now, Mike, at 9-13 overall, they are 75th in Torvik. That is
Yeah,
like incredibly high for that record in the Big East. Now it's because they've had so many close games, like you said, and had they not choked them away and won those games, they would be way higher. But it's just
yeah,
they're horrendous at defense. I think he has done a really good job, Kim English, of rallying the fans around a common enemy, whether it's him directly or not doing that. I think their resources are pretty solid. Their facilities are good. Their arena is great. It's
great fan
definitely a
base.
top half job in the Big East that anybody would want, which is why I think they actually may pull the trigger earlier. Another program might give him a fourth year. I think they can pull somebody. Like there are a lot of solid coaches in the Atlantic 10 and the MAC and in and around the Northeast here. So I think that they might be able to bring somebody better in.
Can I interest you in Ed Cooley?
I think the fans would hate that. I
Who
I
knows? They
think
might love it.
I think that bridge is burned. Now, spoiler alert, he might be up next in our hot seat candidates list here.
Yeah.
But yeah, the I think he's done a good job of getting talented players there, but to be 0 and to not go to the tournament in this version of the Big East in 3 years with the players that he's had, it's just not really acceptable. So I
Yeah,
think that
I
he's
agree.
probably out at the end of the year, unfortunately for him. All right, Mike, we've got a few in the Big 12. I think two come to mind outside of Jerome Tang, and let's go to Arizona State first. Bobby
Yeah,
Hurley.
that's where I was
It
gonna
it
go.
just seems like this story might be written for him over there. Like he's not from there. I think he enjoys living out there, but he had a couple of okay years there. But I just think that it might be time for them to move on.
Yeah, the writing's been on the wall at Arizona State
Yeah,
for a while. I think he's been there. I think this is his 12th, 11th or 12th season at Arizona State. They haven't won an NCAA tournament game. He's only been three times, and he's gone enough over the years to kind of
yeah,
maintain his job and maintain his position. But when you talk about 12 years, not only do they not won the post in the NCAA tournament, they haven't won a postseason game. Period. And so that's really concerning. You think that Arizona State could do better. Big 12 is a really tough conference, and you're probably going to need a lot more money to compete in the Big 12. But surely they can do better than this. They're going down on what's going to be their third straight losing season, most likely. And he was one of the hottest seats in Power Five basketball coming into the season. But yeah, I don't see how he survives another year in Tempe.
yeah. And I've pulled up his Torvik page here, Mike, and it's just sort of like okay, bad the first 2 years, then he gets them to the tournament barely 3 years in a row.
Yeah,
Like they were 60th in 64th, 55th, and 59th, and then 83rd, 83rd, 51st, 127, 67, 76. Like I don't know. Like there's clearly a ceiling there, right?
yeah,
With he had 12 chances to get them into the top 50 and didn't do it once. And the Buffalo team that he left was pretty much the same as his peak at Arizona State. So, like you said, I think the writing has been on the wall. It'll be the third
yeah.
straight year with a losing record. I think they will move on too. And I think Bobby Hurley might actually be a candidate for the Providence job if it opens. That is something
Could
that
be.
he was linked with the job last time it opened when English got it from George Mason, but I don't think he will be out of coaching for long, unless he wants to be. But I think he'll come back to the Northeast and do something, maybe even as just an associate for UConn for 1 year. like he was at
Yeah.
Wagner, I believe. He was the assistant for his brother, or the
Yeah.
other way around. I'd
No,
have to put
yeah,
it.
he was the head coach at Wagner.
Okay. Yeah,
But
but yeah, I think he's probably on the way out, and I think we'll see him back pretty soon. All right, Mike, the
yeah.
other Big 12 name that I wanted to hit was one that at just a couple years ago, I think was probably considered to be a jump seat candidate, one of the rising stars in
So,
coaching, and potentially a candidate for a blue blood job that he went to if it opened. Hubert Davis got it at North Carolina. I'm going to go to Wes Miller in Cincinnati. Um, it just hasn't really happened for him either over the past couple of years. He has not brought them to the tournament in his 5 years there. They've had a couple of teams in the mid 40s, but has not been able to get them into the tournament. What do you think about Wes Miller being on the hot seat?
yeah, I could be mistaken, but I think I saw something about how he may have gotten a contract extension this year, which would have surprised a lot of Cincinnati fans. I thought I saw something about that, which would make me believe that he wouldn't be leaving. I'll let you fact check me on that one,
Yep.
Sean. But yes, um, he's been well below standard, especially in a program like Cincinnati that expects excellence. I mean, this is a program that year in and year out has been really good. He did a great job at UNC Greensboro, did Wes Miller, but no NCAA tournament appearances. No, I think his best college basketball, postseason tournament finish was quarterfinals in the NIT. So really just an inability to get this program moving in the right direction. They're not really good this year. I'm not sure about the contract extension. If that
Yep.
contract extension is a thing, he probably won't be going anywhere. But otherwise, I don't see how he sticks around. I
Yep. So
really
I've
don't.
I've got it here, Mike. It is a he signed it in December of 2022 through the
Hmm.
end of the 28-29 season. So it would be three
Okay.
additional seasons after this year, and his deal is like a hair under 3 million a year, with it getting to three and then over. So approximately a $9 million buyout after this year.
It's a lot for
It
Cincinnati.
is a lot.
Yeah.
Not completely out of the ordinary. Like if they really wanted to do it, they could, but he might just get a sixth season just because of that. But yeah, defensively they've been really good over the years, and then
Yeah.
offensively, it has just not really clicked there. I think he's had a couple of solid teams in there, but
Some good
like
players too. Giselle James is phenomenal.
when you live around the bubble, it really comes down to a game or two, and it feels like it has a couple of times for him at Cincinnati. If you get into the tournament and you win, you get a good draw and you go to the Sweet 16, then nobody remembers that you were, 22 and 16 before the Big 12
Yeah.
tournament. But yeah, so I think he is a candidate. Maybe not this year, but I still think like there's a chance. Like they could be like enough is enough.
Yeah.
We should be a better basketball program than this, um, and then we'll move on. I'd give that probably about a 5 out of 10 right now. I think the other three are closer to 8 or 9 out of 10. Um,
Yeah.
do you have one more? Because I do.
Yeah. I mean, I have a ton more. I mean, we
Okay.
could go into
Well, let's do
this.
two more then.
Um,
Let's each give one.
yeah. I mean, I'll just list off a couple of names quickly. Jeff Capel, I think he's gone
Okay.
from Pittsburgh. He was on the hot seat going into this year. Pitt's had a really bad year this year. I don't think there's a chance that he's back there. Penny Hardaway, another one, I think
Yep,
at
had him.
Memphis. I
They're
think
bad
he's
this year.
very, very bad. And he was kind of on the hot seat going into this year to begin with. I think their only win really is a win over a not very good Baylor team at home. They've been incredibly unimpressive, and they're in the middle to bottom part of the American Conference. That's unacceptable for
They
Memphis
they should be
basketball.
running that league.
It
To be
shouldn't even
fair,
be
they
close.
have been. They have been, and that's still not been enough.
But it has been enough because he hasn't been performing come March Madness.
Yep.
He's been getting out in the round of 64 instead of, I don't think he has a single Sweet 16 appearance.
Yep. They
That's what
have
they
one
expect out
win
of Memphis.
in 22. They won as a 9 seed in the first round.
Yeah,
Yep.
that they expect better from them. Um, so he's one. Another one that you could talk about, Porter Moser. I don't think he's staying another year. But the guy that I really want to fit, well, couple others. Steve Peichel with Rutgers, it's just no one that came to mind.
Yep.
They've been incredibly underperforming this year.
Yeah, I
But the
think
one I really
he's probably gone too. Peichel.
he's yeah, I think Peichel's gone. The one I really want to focus on though is the one that took on the impossible task of succeeding Jim Boeheim. That's Adrian
Gosh.
Autry.
Yeah. Those Porter Moser and Autry were my last two. But yeah, let's get into this, Mike. So Adrian Autry is hired um, as the successor to Jim Boeheim, like you said. It was from everything that I could tell, it was truly between two candidates, Jerry McNamara and Adrian Autry. And Autry gets it, and then McNamara gets Siena, which is nearby, and he has done a very solid job in his second year or third year there. They should have gone to Jerry McNamara, and I think it might be a pretty simple hire up down the road at Siena.
Absolutely. And I think you look at Syracuse clearly likes to hire within their organization. That's why they hired Adrian Autry. He played at Syracuse. I think he was on staff there for about 12, 13 seasons before he took the head coaching job. But this has clearly been a flop. He hasn't made the tournament once.
It hasn't
Um,
been
they
close,
had a
really.
losing record last year. Yeah, it hasn't been close. And he won't be close this year. So I think that one, it's pretty obvious he's not going to make it. Now, I think the big question is, will Syracuse think, hey, we need to go outside the box? Because Syracuse basketball hasn't been
Yeah.
relevant for pretty much a decade at this point.
Yeah, I would say
You look at the end of,
since yeah, but they had when Buddy Boeheim was there, a couple of those teams were okay, but they haven't been
yes.
at the top of the league since they left the Big East. At the top of the sport since they left the Big East.
And even still, like I think they made a Final Four one year as like a 10 seed. Like
Oh yeah,
they've
they
had
shouldn't have made the tournament that year.
they,
Yeah, their
and
third
they
year
had
in the ACC. Yeah.
and that was Sean. If you look at it, and I will stand by this, the easiest road to the Final Four in college basketball history, and it's not even close. For the listeners, just look it up. Easiest road you'll ever see. So you look the last time they competed for a regular season conference championship was 2013 2014. Their best result since then was a tie for sixth in the 2019-2020 season, the COVID year. Their record in conference that year was 10-10. Look, Syracuse, they had that Final Four. They went to a Sweet 16. I think a couple of other ones with Buddy Boeheim, but they haven't been a real force in college basketball in well over a decade. That's going to have to change. And I would not be surprised if they go with an outside hire for that. Now, look, Jerry McNamara is definitely going to get an interview for this job. I just think that at some point you got to realize enough is enough. We haven't been successful in, really 12 years, except for a couple of lucky tips here and there. Let's go somewhere else.
Yeah, so looking their tournament record, even at the end of Boeheim, like he took two 11 seeds to the Sweet 16 and a 10 seed to the Final Four. Like that is incredibly crazy looking back at
Yeah,
it. Like those were not very good teams analytically, and he look the Syracuse zone. That's what he's famous for. Clearly, it bothers teams that don't see it a lot. But
yeah,
Autry like tried to do it in his first year still to play zone, and like teams that had any pulse from outside would just tee off on him, and they ended up okay because a lot of teams don't have good shooters, and then it's gotten a little bit worse the last 2 years. And even with this state of the ACC, Mike, it's certainly better this year than it has been the last few years, but Syracuse should not be in the middle of the pack of this ACC, and they have
mm-mm.
been for they've had the Sweet 16 years. They've still been in the middle of the pack of the ACC.
Yeah. No, I mean, you never thought you'd see a time when, Texas Tech would be a more relevant, much more relevant team in basketball than Syracuse. Look, I think the NIL era has hurt the Northeastern basketball schools more than anybody else. You looked at, except for UConn, really, all the dominant Big East schools of the late 2000s, they're not really competitive anymore.
Yeah, like Notre Dame
For
and Syracuse, and yeah,
Pittsburgh,
yeah,
yeah, Georgetown, the list goes on and on. Um, you'd love to see for them to get back to being competitive. I don't know how that looks, but Syracuse definitely has money and the resources to be able to have a great basketball team, and I expect them to do better in a pretty lackluster ACC.
And if you're a coach of, let's if they hire McNamara, I think it'll be easy. But let's say they don't. If you're the coach of, trying to think of its solid mid major in the Northeast, Joe Gallo from Merrimack, for example. What about like you? A coach should see Syracuse and be like, I could get them into the tournament in year one. Like, get the fans to care a little bit about it, and they play in the football stadium. It's a really unique place. I've never been there, but that's what people have been saying. Like, I don't think it'll take a lot to get Syracuse off the ground. Like, they've been terrible the last few years, and they've still been in the middle of the pack. So you get
I'll
a
give
little
you
bit of a pulse there, and I think they could be in the top half of the ACC in year one.
I'll give you a name right now. I'll give you John Schertz, St. Louis coach. He's a New York guy to begin with, born and raised in Brooklyn. Spent most of his early career coaching in Queens and at Lynn, so in the Northeast. He's obviously had success at Indiana State and St. Louis
Josh
in
Shirts,
Lincoln
yeah, yeah,
Memorial.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, Shirts I think would be a great hire for Syracuse. But look, I also think that Syracuse is a good enough program to where you could entice a guy from the Power Five to
Yeah.
come in and get that program. At least it used to. I don't know if it still has the luster that it once had when Jim Boeheim was the head coach there. But if it has anything like it did, you could absolutely get a Power Five guy to jump ship and go there.
Like Chris Holtman, maybe from DePaul. I think he would do that. Depends how much he
Yeah,
likes living in Chicago. But yeah, I think the days of like definitely it being a Power Five coach are over. I think we've seen it in basketball and football with teams that traditionally are not very good at that sport have gotten to the mountaintop. Like we see in basketball with all these SEC schools that are clearly football schools
yeah.
be at the top of the sport. We had Indiana in football do it. And like I think the days of Power Five coaches jumping around after that one super domino year with Enfield and Musselman and Calipari and Pope and like I don't think we're going to see that anymore. So I think you might have to go to the lower ranks, find somebody who's won some basketball games, who's established a program, has not had just one good year, and maybe you can catch lightning in a bottle. Like when Alabama hired Nate Oates, like I'm not sure how many other people wanted to hire him. They took a
No.
chance on a guy who had coached high school and had, you know, had one of the better MAC programs, got them to the top, and look where they're at right now. Now this year's not going as great as they want, but that has
Hey,
been a
he's done more than
program.
anybody else for Alabama
Oh
basketball.
yeah.
Yeah.
So next year, or not next year, next week we'll get into some of the jump seat candidates a little bit, like Shirts and some of these other coaches at the top of their leagues, and we'll see if we can start linking some names to some potential
Yeah.
job openings. So, Mike,
Another
unless
guy that's losing his job,
you
Micah
got any
Shrewsbury at Notre Dame.
Micah Shrewsbury at Notre Dame, yeah, seems to be
Doesn't stand a chance.
now. Talk about somebody who cashed in on a March run more than Micah
No kidding.
Shrewsbury.
One
They
good
were.
season at Penn State.
I wouldn't say it was
Man.
one whole good season. I think it was one good run and a
Yeah,
part of one
it
good
really
season.
was.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
part
so
of a good season.
we'll start linking some names to some of the potential openings next week. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.